Now I'm going to give the floor to Ali Shahbaz. He is Pakistan's youth delegate to UN Commission on Sustainable Development. He attended the Rio Plus 20 Summit as an official delegate 3 years ago. Currently student actively engaged in grassroots sustainable development issues and advocates in favor of equitable development, green economy, climate change, capacity building, and holistic conflict resolution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the panelists who gave their remarks and insights into this process. So I basically work with the Sustainable Development Policy Institute, which is a strong believer in partnerships in Pakistan. It is chairing the Climate Action Network in the South Asia chapter. It is also holding two-track dialogues with the Afghani as well as Indian think tanks, which is an important contribution in terms of conflict resolution. It is also fostering partnerships with the public and private sector, and through its work over the years, it's been having rankings globally as the 38th in transdisciplinary research and 19th in the region of South Asia and Pacific. So why do we think at Sustainable Development Policy Institute that we need a regional cooperation? We feel that it is an important element of understanding a good gesture of implementation when it comes to regional and sub-regional organizations, because the geographical proximity of organizations within certain regions and the access to issues of those grassroots is something that the United Nations has to work in conjunction with to advance the post-2015 development agenda. However, I would take a moment, first of all, to reflect upon, or actually to self-actualize upon what exactly do we mean by a term called as organization. For me, an organization is not limited to the conventional definition of just a registered group of individuals who are working towards a targeted cause. An organization in the 21st century should be society in general. It should be communities in general. It should be the individuals that shape society, individuals that are proactive in society. I think that is the approach, the redefinition of organizations that is required within the United Nations. And once we have a realization and a recognition that we are having cooperation within sectors of society, within individuals and groups within society who are working towards, for example, post-2015 development agenda, then we're empowering them. And that empowerment comes through policy action. It comes through the protection of vulnerable groups, such as women, such as indigenous groups, such as the young people, which we try to endorse intergenerational justice through. Intergenerational justice, such as the rights of future generations, because young people form as aspiring leaders of the next generation of tomorrow. And the investment we put in these groups is essentially what will turn out to be of valuable leadership in the coming decades. But why do we need to recognize the grassroots as people who are going to empower the movement towards cooperation between the UN as well as these regions? Because the post-2015 development agenda is not just a set of targets. We need to realize that unlike the Millennium Development Goals, the post-2015 development agenda is more of a mass consciousness. It is more of a movement. It is a paradigm shift that is going to be carried on with the momentum of all stakeholders integrated and engaged within this consciousness. Because as the Secretary General himself quoted many times, that we are making stakeholders such as women and youth not as objects of the movement in the post-2015 development agenda. We're making them the actors and the drivers of change within this agenda. And that's why they are the organizations, they are the groups that we need to involve within the UN structure to have a more productive move towards the development agenda. And what would be the models of engagement? We at SDP, I believe very strongly that the models of engagement are enriched upon three very intrinsic steps. Number one, we need to have a compelling need of both common and differentiated responsibilities, as fellow panelists also pointed out. On the second level, we need to have holistic principles. And the third level, I think the most important for me is implementation strategies, because we do talk a lot, we do have lots of resolutions, we do have lots of meetings which are essential, but at the end of the day, I think that we need to congratulate ourselves for admitting to the fact that we need to have an implementation strategy that works in these grassroots levels, and these regional organizations are the ones who are equipped with the tools and the understanding to make this happen. But I think the most, even more important in this subject is the difference between tokenized participation and credible participation, meaningful participation, because tokenized participation has been happening within the United Nations for a very long time, and it is time to have it more credible and more realistic in order to ensure a trust-building relationship between organizations on a regional level as well as the United Nations. But I think one of the conversations that I was having a couple of days before was with a colleague who said that let's have a reality check. Let's have a reality check of which is more like a cynical approach, a devil's advocate. Organizations in different parts of the world have different agendas. They have competing agendas. They have different priorities. So wouldn't this dilute the overall momentum of the post-2015 development agenda? Wouldn't the divergences and different priorities of regional organizations try to counteract the momentum that would be established by the post-2015 development agenda? And the question that I was asked is, how do we find a commonality in our approach? How do we find a common ground? And there was a physicist that my colleague had referenced here. And it says, if I remove your access to food, you will have approximately 3 weeks to live. If I remove your access to water, you will have approximately 3 days to live. And if I remove the air from this room, you will have only 3 minutes to live. So where do our priorities lie? Where is the priority that will establish a commonality amongst all regions? I think this is we all have a realization of our own niche within the metaphase. But another question which is controversial is, who is the most important group? What is the most important organization in this process that we have to engage with, that the UN should prioritize? Is it a group of monks playing, doing meditation on a mountain, praying for the success of post-2015 development agenda? Is it a group of corporate CEOs who are contributing towards it? Is it a group of donors? Is it environmental consultants or research scientists who are trying to establish alternative sources of energy? Is it a group of students like me who are trying to work or speak at forums like these? Or is it lobbyists, or is it governments? But the only thing that I can say is it is everyone. It is an agenda that involves everyone. And all regional and sub-regional organizations need to be involved with it, because everyone is creating the future we want. The future we want is in the hands of everybody. And we cannot accomplish it without the satisfaction and accomplishment of everyone involved in it, in this room, in this country, in this continent, in the wider world, because we do not want to leave anyone behind. And also, I would like to end briefly with one of the other quotations that Secretary General had pointed out in an earlier meeting, was that our first generation, we are the first generation to eradicate poverty, but we are also the first generation to have a chance to stop climate change. This ensures, this is more like an indication of the fact that we have limited time, limited scope, but there are opportunities. There are opportunities which are open to us, and we need to understand that there is a scope for collaboration on all levels. Thank you very much.